Hi, everyone. Welcome to Out and About with Tom and Sherry. So, we were in Tucson, Arizona, and we thought we would share a video of some of the places we visited, one of the restaurants we went to.
So the first place we went to visit while we were in Tucson was the San Javier de Bach Mission, which was really amazing to walk through. Just the history of the building and the mission there. The current church wasn't completed until late 1790s, but the mission itself was initially founded by a Father Kino in the early 1690s.
One thing that was interesting for me on this trip was a few months ago in May 2024, I was in Spain watching the Camino Santiago. And so we obviously went into a lot of churches in Spain. And it was interesting to look at the differences between this church, which was started by the Spanish, and compare it to the churches that I looked at in Spain. There was a lot of similarities and there was a lot of differences.
But the photographs we took of the inside of the church was just amazing. There was just so much to look at, and the wood carvings and the ceramic, or excuse me, the plaster work inside. It was just a very peaceful church to walk through and see, and just
And comparing the interior of the church to the churches we saw in Spain, there's a lot of similarities, in terms of the content of the paintings. But the one thing that really struck me was the quality of the paintings and the quality of the workmanship was not as good as the churches in Spain. But one thing the tour guide said was they had trouble getting the artisans out to work on this church because it was in such a remote area. They paid them double and they still had trouble getting the artisans out to work on it. And it just had a different feel. There was one room that had native baskets in it and stuff, and some of the, I don't know what you call them, the artifacts, I guess, were different. They had Kachina dolls instead of, I guess, European religious statues, and like I said, the native basketry. So there was a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. This one's it just had a real southwestern feel, but it still had that same calm peace that Sherry mentioned. That calm peace was like the churches in Spain. So
so like I say, the photographs that we're showing are just the interior of the church. And then you could also walk around the courtyards. They had an exterior courtyard with a model of the church here that you see. And that kind of helped give you a reference. But this is the interior courtyard, which was really pretty. And the water fountain was trickling water, and it was just a very peaceful area. There were free docent-led tours that started in this courtyard area there by the model. So we listened to that, and it was very informative. And you were able to ask questions, but the courtyard was just a very peaceful area. And there is a monastery there on the property still. So um, off to the kind of left-hand side of this courtyard area, but just a nice peaceful area. The construction of the church too, there are various opportunities to kind of see how that is done. Off to the right here, those long wood slats, those are drainage for the roof, which was interesting. part of the construction of the walls that you can see here, the various building materials that were used. But the architecture was just really very peaceful, and again, here's some of those drainage for the roof. And off to the side here had once been a cemetery, but that had been moved. But it was a nice garden that they set up there. And they have the different stations of the cross there that you see. And you can go inside this little chapel here, light a candle. Walking around the grounds was really nice.
And this was neat. This was the funeral chapel, and there wasn't enough room inside to have a funeral. I think what they did was it had an altar in there, and then, like Sherry said, places to light candles. But I guess people would stand outside during the funeral, which was kind of interesting. For the churches in Spain, they would have different areas within the church for different activities. They'd have, I forget what they called them, abbeys maybe, where they this is a funeral abbey, this is that abbey, and they had different altars and stuff set up in them, where this one was in a different area.
Here's a photograph of the church, as well as a map of the Sonora area. And they have a museum too that you can walk through, see some of the artifacts, because this is a reservation, Indian reservation. Again, more artifacts and baskets, construction. It was neat to see the interior there of how the walls were constructed.
This area really struck me. You could see the construction behind the stucco, with the bricks and the stonework. But what really struck me was the thickness of the wall. I mean, the walls were like 3 feet thick, which I'm sure was partly to, hold the weight of the building, to have walls that were strong enough, and probably partly to help keep it cool, just to have all that thermal mass of all that rock work to help keep the building cool inside, because obviously it was built before air conditioning.
But a lot of photographs.
And this church building, it was stucco over stonework and brickwork, which obviously is a very southwestern type thing. And the weathering on the stucco and the stonework and especially the statues and the carvings on the exterior was very apparent. This church was, relatively speaking, newer than other churches that I saw in Spain, but there was a lot more weathering on them just because of the harsh desert climate. And obviously the landscaping around the outside of the church was very different too. It was a completely different climate and a completely different environment. The churches in Spain were typically in a pretty urbanized environment, where this church was in a much more rural environment. I don't think there was really any buildings to speak of for, a good distance around. So they had the cactuses and stuff in the outside. So that was interesting.
And then that's the exterior there as we were leaving the mission. So something to definitely see. We went to a night exhibition at the Tohono Chul Gardens Galleries there in Tucson, and couldn't get a lot of photographs, but the event was outside in the gardens, and obviously different cacti, and there was art sculpture as well, and the horse was really neat. Tried to get a variety of pictures of that, which was challenging, but a neat sculpture, as well as a mule deal sculpture that was included. But A lot of it we couldn't see. I'm sure it's a really nice place to visit during the day. Lots to see, I'm sure. Um, but yeah, something if you have time to try and see.
So on another day when Sherry was at her conference, I went to the Kartchner Caverns State Park. It was well, everything in Tucson is about a 30-minute to an hour drive. But I went to this Kartchner Caverns State Park, which was really neat. Obviously, there's a cave there. It was a limestone cave, so like most caves are. And I didn't realize it, but the Tucson area at one point was underwater, and all the marine invertebrates, you know, pulled calcium out of the water to make the structure of their body, and then they all settled at the bottom and formed limestone over the eons. This was the visitor center guest area where you go to sign up for your tour and gift shop. And this cavern, it was interesting, was discovered, I believe, in the 70s by a couple guys. I think they must have been cave buffs, and they were walking around and they found the opening to this cave, and they knew it was a big cave because they felt the air coming out of there. And they spent the next few years kind of exploring it, getting back in there, and really deciding what to do about it. So before they really let anybody know about it. And the visitor center talked how the cave was formed and different cave information. Didn't take any photos or videos inside the cave. It was against the rules and it was dark anyways. So, but the cave tour was neat. It was neat being in there, and it was neat being in such a dry environment with the cave. Caves are pretty delicate ecosystems, and they went to great efforts to keep the moisture in the cave, to keep the ecosystem of the cave thriving. And they sprayed you with a mist of water as you went into the cave, which was interesting. But the area surrounding the cave was just beautiful. And the whole Tucson area is beautiful. Just the topography and the desert. Maybe I'm just a fan of deserts, but the saguaro cactuses, I think, really added a lot. This was on a highway that kind of went back to Tucson from old Tucson. I went out there and it was closed, but just really beautiful topography and different than northern Nevada topography, different vegetation, um, a lot greener in color overall. So it was neat.
We went to the Mini Machine Museum of Miniatures while we were in Tucson. Um, it was really neat. The level of detail in the different designs by the different artists is pretty amazing. So we hope you enjoy this little mini visit of the little mini museum.
So here's the El Corral Steakhouse. We saw it in the travel book, and it just had this vibe that we have got to go there. And it's this old school steakhouse. I forget when it was built.
There's a sign in the video here about a 50th anniversary. So just see the slide. We can talk about that. This is the outdoor decor in the front yard. Yeah, the 50th anniversary was 1989. So
It was opened in October 15th, 1939. So you could see in those pictures that when they built it, it was out in the middle of nowhere. And when we went there, it was right down in the middle of town. The Agro Land and Cattle Company.
and they had different displays inside, very rustic Western furniture, but a lot of photographs of cowboys from the 20s and 30s, things like that. The decor was really rustic and just kind of set the mood for the restaurant. In this picture behind the statue of the stage with the horses was the grill. You can see the cook there. He's in black, but that was the grill where they were grilling the steaks.
And the steaks were grilled on a wood fire because we saw him add more chunks of wood to the grill.
Movie posters, and then the menu. They're known for their prime rib, and so we both had prime rib.
We both had prime rib. And the prices were real good, too. I think prime rib was about $30. A ribeye steak was, I think, about $32 or $33. So the prices were excellent there.
And there's a picture of the prime rib dinner that Tom had with some kind of what was this? Corn. Forget what that was. A corn casserole
Corn casserole.
type dish.
Yep. It was good. It had like Ortega chilies in it and stuff. It was good.
Dessert was a cherry cobbler with vanilla ice cream. And then at night, it was all the courtyard was all lit up, flashing lights, neon, things like that. Just a really neat restaurant, and we actually went back a second time and had dinner the second time. I had salmon the second time, and did you have ribeye?
I had ribeye the second time.
The first time we both had the prime rib. So really good restaurant. We would definitely recommend it. So if you're in Tucson, be sure to go to the El Corral.
And it's old school. I mean, that's a real neon sign there. So, yeah, I mean, can't recommend it highly enough. I've got a rule that when I'm out of town, I don't eat food I could get at home, and I don't go to the same place twice. But Sherry and I talked, and we were like, we should go back to the old Corral. It was that good. So while Sherry was at her conference, I went to the Pima Air and Space Museum. If there's an Air and Space Museum, I want to go to it. I really enjoy that stuff. And this was a neat museum. As we go through the pictures, you'll see more. But some Air and Space museums have a more of a focus, and they have a few high quality exhibits. And my general sense overall with this Air and Space Museum was they went more for quantity, and the quality was certainly there, but it was different in the sense that just the really kind of overwhelming number of airplanes and aircraft, and not a whole lot of detail on each one. They had a lot of historic aircraft and unique aircraft, and then just, yeah, here's whatever, a Boeing XYZ you could look at. So So this is at the entrance to the museum, and on the right is a space shuttle solid rocket booster, and they had some mock-up parts on it. So and then this is as you go inside. This is, depending on who you listen to, this is the world's smallest airplane. Somebody else built another airplane that was a contender for the world's smallest airplane. One was a biplane, one was a single wing plane, and then they couldn't figure out what defined the smallest airplane, so they created another categories: world's smallest biplane and world's smallest single wing airplane. But the thing it was tiny. A Wright Flyer replica, a BD-5J. When I was a kid, those were a big deal. I read a lot of popular mechanics, popular science, and they had BD-5s, and then that was the BD-5J, and that's the world's smallest jet. So it was neat to look at one of those. Command module, Apollo command module mock-up. That's a Mercury capsule mock-up. And you look at that and you think somebody sat on that thing on top of a 100-foot rocket and got shot up into space. So it's pretty impressive. Helicopters, that's a Sikorsky Sky Crane. They still use those in a lot of firefighting uses and cargo uses, and a lot of these just random weird paint job planes. I forget what plane that was, but it's got a lot of engines on it. That's a Guppy that they use to transport real big stuff. It's some modified something, I forget what. That is a 787, and I wasn't sure why it was there, but it was I guess it was one of the prototypes. So, but a 787 is a pretty new aircraft. This plane I really like, just the lines of it. It's real Buck Rogers, space age, McDonnell Douglas. This plane was built out of fabric during the war when aluminum was real scarce. That was an old bomber of some sort. I forget what kind. That was interesting with the pusher propellers on a bomber that large. And then every air and space museum has to have an SR-71 Blackbird, and this one had one. And to me, that's just an amazing aircraft. And seeing it in that setting was neat. And down below it, you could see an unmanned plane, a drone, that was kind of along that same design. So that was neat.
Thanks everyone for watching Out and About with Tom and Sherry. We had a great time in Tucson, saw a lot of neat things. We'll hope you, when you're there, you'll check them out.
If you're interested, we also have a video on the hotel that we stayed at in Tucson. So you can check that out. It was an Embassy Suites. Great hotel. So if you're looking for some reviews on the hotel, check that out on our channel.
If you like the video, we'd love for you to give us a like, and we hope you subscribe to the channel. All right, well, we'll see you next time. Thanks.